The Viewpoint, sharing our thoughts, speaking our truth. Moderator Mr. Curtis King. Panel Dr. Adrian Fraser, historian and social commentator. Mr. Mikhail Yusuf Muhammad, member of the Local Reparations Committee. Dr. Dale Dangleblen, professor and author. Sponsors: Jake's Kitchen, Downtown Pharmacy, Remax Result Realty, Joseph Da Silva Senior Memorial Home, Basil's Restaurant and Bar, and LA Unique Upholstery, and General and Maritime Agencies Limited, agents and distributors of Ozone products.
Viewers of SVG-TV, as well as our many listeners on Magic Radio, and those of you who are following our live stream on YouTube. It's another edition of The Viewpoint. Tonight we are focusing on one of the foremost campaigners for black civil rights that we have experienced, and his name is Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Tonight we have a very powerful panel that would be discussing Garvey's impact, his mission generally, his impact. I must first up though apologize for the absence of a female. You know, I like to insist on having a female panelist. But tonight we are all males. Nevertheless, I know that they are quite capable of doing what is expected. I'm going to ask each of them now to introduce themselves before we get right into the program, starting with Dr. Fraser.
Adrian Fraser, historian, columnist, social commentator.
Dr. Dale Dangleblen, I'm a trauma surgeon and medical director in the United States. I'm a self-taught Caribbean historian.
Mikhail Mohammed, I'm the member of the Committee on Reparation for St. Vincent, also Caribbean Special Assistant to the Nation of Islam.
Okay, and I'm your host, our moderator, Curtis M. King. And as soon as we get back, we are going to be looking at Mr. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, or should I say the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and his contribution to the upliftment of persons of African descent. So we take our first break, and then we'll be back.
LA Unique Upholstery. Quality at a low cost. We build to suit your needs. Contact us at Redemption Shops 457-0182 or Stony Grounds 453-2089.
Welcome to Downtown Pharmacy, located close to the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital and opposite the Rubis gas station. We cater for all your pharmaceutical needs and medical supplies, which include injections and vaccines. Our opening hours are 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Thursday, until 6 p.m. on Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. on Saturday, 4 to 9 p.m. on Sunday. Call us today at 452-5552 or text or WhatsApp your prescription to 491-3801 and we will have it ready for pickup at your convenience. Downtown Pharmacy, we are here to serve you.
Reacquaint yourself with St. Vincent's most exquisite bar and restaurant, housed in a building which dates back to 1814. This treasured restaurant is known for their world-famous burgers and club sandwiches, 3-course buffet meals during weekdays, special corporate dinner, after-work lime, or just to relax, unwind, and be you in the wonderful ambience of our rambling mahogany bar. Other services include full-service catering and event planning for birthdays, weddings, parties, or any special occasions.
You'll never regret buying a quality product. The choice is clear. Ozone. All day, every day. Clean clothes with long-lasting freshness. The new Ozone Powder Detergent. A new look and 3 new long-lasting fragrances at an affordable price. The power of Ozone.
Ozone products distributed by General and Maritime Agencies Limited.
Welcome back to The Viewpoint. And as we did indicate, we are going to be focusing on Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We want to look at his mission in this first segment. However, we want to put into context Garvey's own contribution. And to do so, we have to have an understanding of the time in which he lived. So I'm going to start with Dr. Adrian Fraser. Doc?
Yeah, the second decade of the 20th century, a time in the United States, Jim Crow laws, racial oppression. In the Caribbean, the bulk of the Caribbean people struggling. In the case of St. Vincent, struggling for land, small and middle class in the case of St. Vincent. We also have to put on the table the First World War, and the First World War is important in that a number of the people, soldiers who came back from the First World War, joined the Garvey movement because they were led to believe that they were fighting for democracy. There was a lot of discrimination. In fact, during the First World War, you had the British West Indian Regiment, and you had white officers who were the postal man in these. Then the Russian Revolution, and the Russian Revolution is important in that it gave hope to a lot of the lower class in the Caribbean. And in fact, during the Garvey movement, they were telling the people to look towards Russia and China rather than Britain and the United States. Generally colonialism and imperialism, the high point of colonialism and imperialism.
Africa,
so I think that
was being carved.
Yeah, exactly.
Around that time.
And let me just mention too, because this will come into the discussion, but one of the interesting things about Garvey, as we'll see later on, is that he was able to span linguistic barriers and so on at a time when the blacks in the diaspora were unaware of each other, the communication and so on just did not exist.
Okay, well, there's background to the context, but let us just say something about the man himself. Yeah, yes?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because we have to look at Garvey in that period of time and how he was self-taught. I think that's very, very important because, again, that's just a natural brilliance to be able to do what he did. And I think at that time, you talk about everything going on, World War I, the imperials, everything going on, colonialism, and you have a young mind like that. That's so powerful to think outside of the box and see what's going on around him to influence other people. So I think that has to be important because there were not too many people like Marcus Garvey when it came to the intellectual capacity and how he can relate. You talk about learning language, his writing, things like that in terms of the entrepreneurship, business aspect. So you have to give him credit in that regard, and the way he was able to translate from Jamaica, from when he went to Harlem, and how he interacted with certain people. And I think that's where we have to focus because, again, there are few and far people like that comes every once in a while, and you have to give him that credit.
We have to understand his first travels outside of Jamaica in 1910, where he was still a very young man, where he traveled to South and Central America. He credits Booker T. Washington and the reading of this book for opening up his mind.
Up from slavery.
Up from slavery, yes. That opened up his mind to that reality of our condition out of slavery and what needed to be done for ourselves. And also, like you're saying, being self-taught, but just the thought of moving at such a young age from Jamaica, then going to South America. Then he went to England before he went to Harlem. That shows the kind of spirit, These were serious odds to overcome. And he looked everywhere, and at the time when we were talking about the First World War, when Africa is being carved out, and he's saying, where is black man's government? Where is the black man's nation? So it's very, very crucial to understand that it comes at once in a generation, if it does, and he's a serious asset to us.
But I mean, in his first visit at that early age of say around 23, he went to Central and South America,
And Europe.
right, and England, yes, where it was said on his return to Jamaica, what he did when he summarized the result of his tour, he recognized that the black man was being exploited everywhere, degraded everywhere, and he would have heard issues about Africa, the continent itself, where life was said to be horrible also. So, as you pointed out, I think, then is when he asked himself the questions. Where are the black man's government? Where the president? Where the king and kingdom and so on? And he vowed basically...
So I could not find them, so I decided I would help make them.
Exactly. So it is from that standpoint, I believe, we could start to look at his mission. What was his mission?
Before you go there, I just want to add something to what you're saying about the man Garvey himself.
Yeah.
What is really astounding is that this man went to the United States and established leaders like Du Bois
Yes.
and so on. He was able to do something that they never dreamt that they could do, and that created a bit of
and
tension
have the impact.
in the force.
Between
And
the two,
it tells
yeah.
you something about the man.
Yeah.
Well, also the fact that what he was trying to do, Du Bois and Randolph weren't trying to do. Du Bois and Randolph were trying to get acceptance in an already made system for
Yeah.
the black man.
Yeah.
So he came and pretty much shone a light on them.
And that gets back into his mission.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's
So
important.
let us start the discussion on his mission. How do you see it? Mikhail?
It's very important. Before we go too deep into Garvey, it's very important that we realize that we're probably the only people that worship their heroes. We always worship dead people. We praise and try to follow dead people, especially after they die, and as if they're in a bubble. But all these people, as great as they are, they come from an experience that is common. They come out of us. They're the best of us, and they're waves towards a goal. Garvey was a major wave, but he was a wave nonetheless, and it's important we study what he did good, how he did it, and not deprive ourselves from learning from the lessons from what he did that was not so good, so that we don't waste that lesson. Because his first attempt was in Jamaica. His first attempt at the UNIA was in Jamaica. It was a failure. They say none is a prophet in his own country. So it was more successful in New York, in Harlem, as Dr. Fraser said, especially tapping into that resentment of those returning soldiers who were expected to be respected and couldn't find it. They had seen things that they have been treated in a way in Europe that they couldn't be treated in their own country now. So he tapped into this. But he was trying to build a wholesome new reality, not just trying to improve the conditions of the people on a day-to-day basis, but create a whole new reality out of almost thin air. So we started the UNIA around 1917, and at the time, Randolph, like we were saying, Randolph, Du Bois, even Washington was still around somewhat, were really seeking to integrate black people into American mainstream, improve the condition of their life, and Garvey wasn't even bothered with that. Garvey was really trying to redirect our focus to ourselves, change our view of ourselves. He did something that 100 years ago, he did something that was pretty astonishing in that he had a woman's arm in the UNIA, where women were in charge of reshaping their image. I mean, this still being done today, still needs to be done today, and he understood that, the importance of that 100 years ago.
I think the brilliance of Garvey, I will stay on that. When he went to Harlem, he failed in Jamaica, but when he went to Harlem, there was an awakening there already.
Yeah.
That he saw, that he could tap into. That really made him successful, and he's influenced a lot of people. So I don't think you would have a Malcolm, or you wouldn't have a Martin, etc., without Garvey. So I think that's important to understand the foundation, what he met in Harlem, but what he sparked when he got to Harlem. And I think that's very, very important when you have to talk about Garvey and what he achieved.
Yes.
I would say that when you look at the name that he gave to his organization, Universal, it tells you right away what the man was about. And the fascinating thing about him is that he was able to span over 40 countries, millions of people, and given the state of technology and so on, that communication technology is just an astounding thing.
He understood media, right? Because he was in media.
Yeah,
right?
but the media was very limited.
Right, yeah, but he used it in his. Though it was limited, he used it in his own capacity, how he knew, So I think that's very, very, very essential also.
But you see, in kind of pushing the discussion in a particular direction, given what some things we want to look at, we have to also remember that Garvey identified that the race, the black man, seemed to be operating as a collective without a purpose, without an aim. And he felt that if you are going to survive, if you are going to transform from the conditions that you are in, that you have to have an aim and purpose. And he identified certain things that he felt had to be done in order to sustain a purpose. Like the education, people don't speak a lot about that, but the very visit that he embarked on to the United States, it is said that he was on a mission to raise funding, to set up schools, and it's similar with that Washington had done. Right, and also, and I always like this aspect of Garvey, how he viewed self-reliance. In fact, I would say that was one of his cornerstone issues, where he was saying we were dependent on other races, other people, spouses from outside for everything. And if you're going to do that, you're not going to survive. It won't be sustainable. And up to today, we still have those issues. So I think things like self-reliance would have been a key issue for him to address.
And with that discipline also.
Right, of course.
Which I think he did by example, because he actually did these things.
Yeah.
Many folks did not follow. But remember, he did a lot of the things by example. And it's unfortunate that certain things happened along the timeline. But I think what you're talking about in terms of the education and the certain segments,
the entrepreneurship,
he did that, and he showed us, right? He bought the boats, he had the print press.
You talk about the timeline.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that his first speech in Harlem was in 1917, and by 1922, 23, he was already in legal turmoil.
Trouble, yes,
right?
yes.
So within a very short, because when you get into trouble with the law, then that's taking all your energy, right? So you're not starting new things, you're trying to maintain what you already got. So everything that he really did was in the span of 5 years.
Right.
We're talking the Star Line, we're talking all the factions, the women's arm, the schools, the businesses. He owned, the UNIA owned a whole chunk of 125th, for a while. So he started a lot of enterprises and a lot of ventures that on their own, individually, can take your whole time and energy.
Right.
So he was trying to create a reality that, of course, not just for the UNI members, but for all black people to see. Because he's trying to lift everybody to make sure that everybody sees themselves in their proper light. That's why they had uniforms. You could be a janitor during the day, but then at night you went to the UNI meeting and you put on a regal uniform and you felt empowered. You saw what you could be. Right. You weren't tricking yourself to think you were a marshal, but you at least knew that this is what I can be.
Yeah. Which brings me to our next point again, in terms of Garvey's whole philosophy about community, where he saw a lot of the solutions, as I'm saying, inherent in the communities, black communities. So his whole mission seemed to be saying, look, we have to uplift the black man, whether he is in Africa, which is his homeland, and the diaspora, whether it's in North America, the Caribbean, Europe, where have you. And he was saying that, look, you can start in the black communities themselves. I mean, what he sold as shares in his business enterprises or among members, and Adrian, you can speak to this issue where, for example, they're saying Garvey at one time, depending on who you read, would say that his UNIA had over 8 million persons in 40 different countries, in over 900 branches. It was said that a branch was here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
There was a branch in St. Vincent which was based in Stubbs. Also you had in Clare Valley and Lomans Leeward. There were 475 members in St. Vincent. 275 came from Stubbs.
And at the time population was?
The population would have been what?
About 40 something.
No, man, less than that. Probably less than that.
Yeah. But the point I'm making though, you see his universal appeal, and it is basically one that is aimed at, as I'm saying, uplifting the black man. So I would say in summary that, I mean, his mission seemed to be one where he wanted to place the black man in his rightful position, not better than, not less than, but if you like, an equal footing with the dominant race, if you like, at the time.
But added to that, what you're saying is that we blacks could do it for ourselves, and we don't have to depend on anybody. I think that's the important thing, you know. You have it within you to do it.
Yes.
And from an economic standpoint, because he realized that's what was needed, is that economic power. Yes. And you talked about the legal problems, that all ties in to his connections and the 8 million people you mentioned, the 40 countries, because he had gotten so powerful over such a large span of territory that people were not looking at him.
I would want to come back to that very point that he made with the economic and political power, because it is said that Garvey's philosophy was one that basically saying, look, political power is based on economic power, and not the other way around, because that is exactly what you find in most of our societies. We feel the blacks get into political power, and that would naturally solve all the economic issues.
The importance of Africa for Garvey was also the fact that, yes, you need economic power, but you also need, if you're going to have political power, that political power is on over some piece of land, and he understood that that wasn't happening in America. And so he was trying to raise it, and Africa was there in terms of land, but Africa did not exist as a political entity. And so he understood that, well, if we can galvanize the millions in America and the Caribbean, but he was mainly focused on America, then we can see if we can influence and have a piece of land in Africa. Because at the end of the day, that's where the focus was.
And Ethiopia and Liberia were the ones that stood out because they were not under colonial control.
It's interesting to note also that around that time, I mean, within 2-3 years, was then called the Bureau of Investigation. It was not called the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Had a general they created a general intelligence division, and found a young lawyer to head it, and the first and only case that they had to work in 1919 when they created it was Garvey.
Edgar Hoover.
And the young lawyer was J. Edgar Hoover. And so from just speech at that time, I mean, we talking at 1919, we're talking a few businesses in Harlem, a newspaper that carries around, and a few speeches was enough for the creation of a new division that grew into. That's why I was saying in the beginning, none of this is in a vacuum for us or for our enemies. That these are waves, you know. This.
So what you said
what
then?
was interesting about Edgar Hoover is that from the very beginning, well, the authorities were alarmed because of the kind of connections he was making to people. So Edgar Hoover, from the very beginning, was waiting for an opportunity. He actually said he has not as yet, defied any of the. But we think we might have him on something. So they were looking for him to make a misstep at any time because they could not take the fact that he was beginning to make that connection with the black people.
Should we say then his mission with this redemptive, liberational kind of focus would have frightened those persons in power, so to speak, in the United States?
Not only in the United States, but also everywhere.
Right.
They felt threatened by this man who was appealing to the blacks.
Right. Just imagine how Europe was dealing with Africa at that time, and you have this young, brilliant, black man who was able to do that. Right. Yeah. I read a very, very great book called COINTELPRO. Right.
Yeah.
I think that really tells you a lot.
That's where it starts.
You see about J. Edgar Hoover and the modus operandi, starting from way back all the way up into current times.
And I mean, Garvey's movement also, the fact that it was gaining traction elsewhere, not just in the United States. In fact, it is interesting when you read that he didn't receive that kind of positive response in Jamaica. But when the UNIA was established, he had throughout the Caribbean several branches, included a number in Jamaica itself.
Because he had been successful in Ireland. So he did it in Ireland, and then it had rippling effects.
Back to the Caribbean.
Back to the Caribbeans, but the thing is, the importance of always keeping this, because right away, if we're talking a new agency, basically the FBI, is the birthday of the FBI, and we're talking Hoover, who was there from him until the 70s. Then the same modus operandi, the same techniques, that were used in the 60s and 70s were pretty much at their infancy at that time.
Fine-tuned.
So we're talking infiltrators inside. We're talking sabotage, campaigns and the likes. And all this was started by Garvey. I mean, for Garvey.
But again, for the benefit of listeners, especially our young listeners, when you look at his focus on history, where we always quote this famous statement where he talk about people without a knowledge of their history, their culture, and so on, like a tree without roots. And this focus, all designed with the intention to develop among people pride, dignity, self-confidence, self-esteem, if you like. Exactly. Would you say that Garvey would have played a significant role at that period in bringing about that kind of development, especially in the diaspora?
I don't think anybody that did anything from then up to today can deny Garvey's role in this, because he was the first one to actually do it in a massive way. That parade, that parade alone, the images, the impact of an image on, I mean, there was thousands in the parade, but we're talking the whole of Harlem watching it. right? So whether you agree or not, you're not a member, but you're being affected. Every black person, children, all the way to grandma was in their window that day. You couldn't help but to be proud. You had never seen. We're talking some people had been born in slavery at that time. You know, in 1920, some people had been born in slavery or could remember their mother telling, and now you've seen hundreds and thousands of black people, black women dressed, you know, in regal apparel. That image, coupled with everything that was taught weekly, right, now about what we actually did in Africa, how we were. 1910, we're talking black people thinking that, well, before slavery, which is yesterday, which is my grandmother, before that we were in a tree eating bananas in Africa. Now you're taught otherwise.
No,
and you're seeing it now.
But you're speaking about the U.S., but what the impact which a man had worldwide, where people were not seeing those kind of images.
No.
I think that is the thing that is astounding.
Yeah.
You know?
I think historically that Harlem, the pictures, the hat, and I think that sticks out. But getting back to what you were asking, I think he did achieve in that period of time what he wanted to achieve, because we're talking about it. We say that he went to all these countries, the impact on Harlem, coming back to the Caribbean. So I think he did achieve. I think what happened after Garvey is where things fall short. But Garvey, in his time span, did the best that he could have done, because, like you said, these people were coming from slavery, right? And to be able to take that's exactly that mentality. Think of what he was fighting.
I mean, we're talking a short we're
period
not
of
talking
time.
a generation. We're talking 5 years.
And the fact that we're still talking about him in with such passion, I think he was very effective in that time period.
He was effective, but to be fair and just to history and to him, I'm not convinced that he did what he wanted.
No.
He did. I mean,
right.
He did a tremendous impact. But it is important. I feel it is important that we extract the lessons of where he.
Well, we'll come back to that discussion in the other part. Yes. In the second segment, we would want to look at that, because we want to look at whether or not there's still work to be done to fulfill the mission. So before we come to that, there's another point I wanted to get out. Now, Garvey, when you read a lot of writers, yes, he is seen as a controversial figure, okay? But you wonder, does mainstream academic lift Garvey to that level that we, the ordinary people, they put it, have put Garvey?
But we're not, mainstream is not us. We don't control mainstream. Because if we did, probably he would be there.
I did 21 years, before I went to the States, and I can tell you from my history books, right? I think it was more for Eurocentric focus, even in the Caribbean, right? I knew more about John Hawkins and Francis Drake than I knew of Marcus Garvey. You see what I mean? So I don't think that justice has been done in that regard in terms of curriculum and anything else.
Because we don't control the curriculum, every time we do get a chance, we do ourselves a disservice in that we worship our heroes. We don't study them.
Right.
White people have the luxury to look at Caesar and they'll study what he did good, where he failed, so we can learn the lessons and replicate. And they see that it all links. We don't do that. Once in a while, we get a chance. We got a month. Or we got an occasion, and we take this figure and we lift them up and we praise them, but we don't learn.
Doc, but I asked in light of the fact that now, in a Caribbean context, certainly in a Jamaica context, where, and I'm starting with Jamaica, but you could refer to the wider Caribbean, where more and more now, we, the ordinary, we, the black people, we have a greater level of control over our curricula. So that is why I'm saying, even within the Caribbean academia, have they really elevated Marcus Garvey?
Well, I mean, you can't isolate Marcus Garvey. There's so much more to be done. I mean,
yeah, but what I'm
the whole
saying, in
question
terms
about-
of going there as he is making the point, rather than just celebrate him from
Right.
time to time, then you could go and study the
Yeah.
works of Marcus Garvey. I mean, I did history at UWI, but there wasn't any course on Marcus Garvey and his impact. And this is UWI.
Right.
No, I was saying that
Do we
even
control
apart
you?
from Marcus Garvey, they have not been putting on the agenda things that they should put. It's not only Marcus Garvey, but and it's the whole mentality of these people.
Okay, well, we'll continue the discussion next segment, and we'll be looking at what needs to be done to fulfill what Garvey was seeking to accomplish. But we have a break now, so we'll be right back.
At RE/MAX, we know you want to sell your property at top dollar and as fast as possible. To help you sell at top dollar, all of our agents are trained to negotiate the highest possible price for your property. And to sell as fast as possible, our agents can access over 120,000 agents around the globe, which results in more potential buyers. This is why nobody in the world sells more real estate than RE/MAX. Contact your RE/MAX agent today and get your property sold.
LA Unique Upholstery. Quality at a low cost. We build to suit your needs. Contact us at Redemption Shops 457-0182 or Stony Grounds 453-2089.
A funeral is considered as the last goodbye. The memories are for you, the family, and loved ones. Joseph the Silva Senior Memorial Funeral Home sympathizes and understands the grieving process. They go the extra mile, offering counseling, private funeral, chapel service, night viewing, and church service, along with other services expected at a professional funeral home. Visit the office at Mesopotamia. A warm, modern, and customer-friendly environment awaits you. Joseph the Silva Senior Memorial Funeral Home, offering affordability in time of need. We are here. We care.
In the event of a storm, there can be flooding, landslides, and lightning strikes. Are you protected? What about a hurricane, an earthquake, volcanic eruption, tsunami, or even a bushfire? Are you protected? Century Insurance protects you, your family, your home, your business. Talk to one of our friendly agents today. Call our Kingstown office at 456-2247 or Beckway 458-3030. Call Century Insurance. We can protect you. Century Insurance, upstairs the First St. Vincent Bank building in Kingstown.
Welcome back to The Viewpoint, and in this segment we allow for your calls, we allow for your WhatsApp messages. So let me remind you again, you could follow us live on our YouTube stream, and you could join the discussion by calling the hotline 458-088, or you can WhatsApp 530-8962. Again, the hotline number is 458-0088 or WhatsApp 530-8962 to be part of the discussion. So we entertain your calls and your messages in this section. But we want now to move on to Garvey's work. How has this work contributed to the development of persons of African descent? I mean, we have been talking around it all the time, but let us focus. Can we identify in specific areas where Garvey has impacted positively on our people of African descent?
I want to say this though. Well, for sure, one area is that because he pushed the envelope so far to, we had a call, I think.
You have a call? Yeah, let's take the call. Good night, caller. Welcome to the 3 Point. You miss that caller, the caller can call
He
back.
pushed the
Yes.
envelope so far, right, that it allowed for a lot of other people now to fill in. Another thing that cannot be overlooked is influence on, even indirect and unbeknownst to himself, but what became the Rastafari movement. This has to be one of the major legacy.
Okay, we have the caller. Good night, caller.
Hello, good night.
Good night.
I thought it was Saidisha.
Yes, I recognize your voice.
So now we
Yes,
have,
good night to
Now we have
Mikhail.
your
now we have a female panelist.
yes.
Good night, Dr. Dangoben. Good night,
Good night.
Good night.
Dr.
Good night.
Fraser. How are
Good
you
night.
all doing?
Okay.
Well, it's very good. As we know, the callers would always ask that these programs be repeated. So it's a very interesting program continuing from our emancipation discussion last week. I also would just like to mention that even within the UNIA, the women played also a very important role. And even through the process of slavery and the abolition of slavery, the role of the female was also important. So, you know, the females always need to make sure that their input is heard and their presence is seen and felt. All right? I would also, I'm not sure if at the start of the program, Dr. Dangoben got a chance to give us a plug tomorrow. The IMUC, Integrated Medical Urgent Care, along with the Rastafari Working Committee, will be hosting a lecture on Marcus Garvey. Dr. Dangoben will be one of the speakers, as well as a brother, Ishaka Williams. So we're inviting persons to come on out tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at French's house. And it's a public forum, so all are invited. All right, so we can continue the discussion and also plan for other works that we have in the pipeline.
Okay. That's
All right,
good.
so have a pleasant night, brothers.
Thank you.
And, you know, just always giving the balance to
You
the
too.
female. All right.
Okay. Yes, you were making the point.
Well, yes, the Rastafari movement, although not directly, Garvey did not have a voluntary influence in it, but nonetheless his work did spark it, and the Rastafari movement in terms of keeping our consciousness and keeping our focus on Africa, on our history, you know, can never be overestimated.
Okay, yes?
I think all the greats that came after always paid homage to him. Talk about the Rastafarian. I think it's obvious in Bob Marley's songs. Several of his songs actually quotes Marcus Garvey. Right. So I think that's very important not to dismiss, yes, his impact on Rastafarianism, but from Martin Luther King, from Malcolm X, from many of these leaders, they go on to quote Garvey and the changes into the 60s and the 70s in the U.S. and the change that happened for black people. I think you can all trace that back to Garvey and what happened in Africa also. I think we should not underestimate the impact there, and I think there was a certain pride, call it black pride, even with the Panthers. Let's call it
Black
what it
Panthers.
is. Yes.
Because that's what it is. I mean, that's why I keep always stressing that, you know, none of this is in a vacuum, because
Right.
it's waves, right? So Garvey pushed the envelope, you know, and like a wave, it goes in and went back out. But then Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam was founded just on the heels of Garvey's demise, and the UNIA had founded tens of thousands of members, former members of the UNIA joined that movement, right? And that got pushed, and then you had Malcolm, then you had the Panthers was influenced by Malcolm's assassination.
Right.
So all of this trickles back, but the first time that there was such a movement, the first time that there was a push, was the UNIA. I mean, we could also try to say go back and he got influenced, but he hadn't really, in truth, there's nothing he could look back on to be directly influenced in terms of movement, except Booker T's, but again, he didn't see it, he read it, right? So he had to internalize it, which is much more difficult.
Yeah, but we have to say too that just about everything started with Garvey.
Yeah.
All
Walker,
of it is that
right.
you come up to the Black Power
Everything.
movement,
Yes.
everything.
Everything.
The Pan-Africanism is something which we should not forget.
Yes.
Kenyatta and Nkrumah, they were strong supporters of Garvey. They talked about the influence which Garvey had on
Because
them.
they were young students.
And they
at
were
the time.
young students just going back to Africa, and that is very important.
But, Doc, what about Garvey's whole impact on, say, the development of the trade union movement in the Caribbean per se? Because one of Garvey's issues had to do with how workers were treated. But we'll come back. Good night, caller. Welcome to the viewpoint.
Hello.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes, we are hearing you loud and clear.
Sorry about that thing. But the aspect I want to look at is that Garvey only understand the whole economic and how it links back to power. And he realized if the black people was to get anywhere in life, they had to control their own economy. In reading a number of articles and books about him, he realized the situation that black people were facing throughout the world. He struggled with it in Jamaica, wasn't successful because, as he said, profit has no honor in his own home. So when he went to New York and he started becoming successful, it was a threat to the United States. So that's why he was from charge for evading tax and those sort of things. He has ways of trying to destroy any black leader that tried to unite and get black forces moving. And if we follow that throughout history, we would see that.
Yes, fair enough.
Yes. So it's important that we now take this legacy and ensure that the younger ones understand this whole aspect of it, having economic power, because that is the whole issue. If you do not have an economic power base that you could levy from, basically you would always be benevolent to others, idea, and they keep on leading you astray.
Okay, so
that's why you see the white supremacy in America and Europe is of that way, because it has a base of the economic.
Yes.
We don't see that much of the black. Pan-Africanism died because why? You don't have the economic.
Right. This current day, we have to be. I mentioned the economic, power and the example that Garvey was trying to emphasize. He did emphasize. We have to be very careful in current day to emphasize economic power, because you have to look at how you go about getting that economic power, because that itself can be dangerous. Garvey did it by hard work and showing examples, right? So we have to be very, very careful when we use the word economic power, because you can go about obtaining economic power in different ways. So we have to also be very careful about that this current day.
He understood that you have to be realistic.
Right.
Booker T showed him that a lot of work needed to be done to raise us from the level that we were in terms of just being able to live. Because Booker T was teaching in his school. I mean, yes, he was teaching carpentry and masonry and brickmaking, but he was also teaching people that they needed to wash daily and they need to take care of their teeth. I mean, and they need to use forks and knives to eat, because that's where that's the condition that we were in, right? And so Garvey understood that we need to reshape a people. The economic is what will allow you to do it, but it's not the end all of it all. And he trying to do it holistically, maybe trying to do everything within a short span of time, with very few people that were qualified, was a lot, but it still needs to be done.
But let us not forget, we are dealing now with a different context.
Right.
A lot of these African countries are now independent.
Yes.
They're in a global kind of atmosphere.
And
So what Garvey's situation is very unique.
Totally.
He worked within the context of what he had there. But you could be inspired by Garvey, but you also have to begin to forge out new paths, even in terms of how you achieve economic power and so on.
I think, yeah, definitely. But I think the issue, and if you look at Africa, and we talk about economy and we talk about power, I think Garvey wanted the greatness in all of us, every single one of us, not a divided folks, not a class system, so I think that's what's important. That's not, I think, translatable today, because you see that huge disparity in terms of economic power. Did not exist at the time. Right.
Yeah, but I mean, Garvey's message of self-reliance and Africa for Africans. I mean, I think the formation of the African Union, the union of all African states, even though it still has a lot to do.
Yes.
In a sense, emerge out of that same sort of conversation. And I know people are critical of Gaddafi, but part of Gaddafi's program too was self-reliance for the African continent. And he was not just willing to talk about it, but in putting monies into that.
Hence what I was saying about it's important to learn the lessons of the failures too.
Exactly, because
Gaddafi failed to do that.
But not only that, but the point I wanted to make is that whenever you see persons are operating outside of the box, so to speak, or the establishment face a threat or feel threatened by the actions being taken, they always find some way to bring them down. Right. The same way that they brought down Garvey. And part of the lesson, I think, that we need to learn is how you deal with this thing so that every effort would not end up in failure because of the machination of others. I'm not saying it's only others, because among us, we also make the mistakes too.
Right. Yeah? I think the vilification of many leaders, if you go way back, if we want to take Libya, for example, we talk about, we go back to Mussolini in 1930. His aim was to pacify, Libya, destroy Libya, to recolonize it with Europeans. That's a fact. There has to be that certain degree of paranoia by certain leaders to protect. And I think that's one of the things with folks like Gaddafi, whether he failed or he succeeded or not, there is that sense of vilification of all great black leaders that stands in that path of the enlightenment of black people. I think that's
a failure to understand what it is, because of the type of people that we are, and we don't want to be saying, well, they're not my enemy because of the color of their skin, the color of their eyes. But that is not what it's about.
No. Let me just take a message from WhatsApp. Good night, and your program is very informative and very interesting topic. I am proposing that some local businesses sponsor Dr. Adrian Fraser's program of From Whence We Came, document with a program, to be back on radio. I used to look forward listening to it on 705 radio many moons ago. So there's need. Again, when you have these sorts of discussion, persons go back to those times, because it seems that we are not having as regular as we should programs like these. But I mean, we could only do so much.
Let me just respond to that a bit, because interestingly enough, the person said that because they wanted me to bring back the program, but the problem is sponsorship. They can't get sponsorship.
Okay, next WhatsApp message. Good night. Did Marcus Garvey teachings have an influence on the wave of riots and uprising that took place throughout the Caribbean in the 1930s, especially in islands where they were more organized trade union-wise? They sound like a teacher student, 1935.
But what it did, the whole question of racial pride and so on, played into that. And when you brought in the Ethiopia thing, because in the case of St. Vincent, the invasion of Ethiopia was in October 1935. Just shortly after that, you had the riots. And in the riots, this thing came out. And in fact, one of the leaders of that time, Albert Timarisho, the father of federation. He was actually the vice president of the Friends, International Friends of Ethiopia, and he went through all the Caribbean preaching about and trying to get assistance for Ethiopia. So Marcus Garvey's teachings, and especially the whole question of pride and relating to Africa, were very important, and it affected the consciousness of people and what they were able to do.
I will say, emphasizing his point of understanding history, reading history, and where we come from. A lot of folks forget about the invasion of Ethiopia, and its impact. And there were several uprisings, you're right, in the Caribbean. I know there was a big one in Trinidad at the time. So yes, there's a huge influence there. But again, these are things that we've forgotten. I will be talking about that tomorrow.
Yes. What about organized trade unionism?
Well, I don't know so much about the organ, but he impacted definitely on the labor movement. And I'm using St. Vincent as an example, because that group in St. Vincent, one of the first things they did was to send a petition to the governor demanding increased wages and better working conditions. And they actually they took some laborers, went to Government House to speak about it. And I think that's happening throughout. So the whole question of labor and so on was very important. But I don't know how it impacted on the trade unions itself. But it must have had some
incidentally,
impact.
One of the fiercest opposition he got in America was Randolph, who was instrumental in labor unions, because Garvey's focus was not to get, as we say again, was not to get black people a better place in the white man's world, but to create the black man's world. So he was in that focus.
Hold on. Good night, caller. Welcome to the Viewpoint. Good night, caller. Good night. Okay. Caller, you can call back. The number to call is 458-0088, or you can WhatsApp us at 530-8962. What about Garvey's whole impact in Jamaica? I mean, he was named the first national hero, which suggests that ultimately, if it's only the establishment, at least persons felt that he was important enough. But I mean, we hear Garvey being idealized in songs and so on.
But that came afterward, because when he did return to Jamaica, I mean, his last years in Jamaica before he left and went back to England, he was not held in high regards at all.
No, but when he went back to Jamaica, the whole country virtually came and supported him. The authorities, especially when he started getting involved in politics, they just put all sorts of obstacles in his way.
But eventually it trickled down. Eventually whatever the authorities' view of him were trickled down. Because his last years he wasn't.
No, but he was a member of one of the city council. I'm not sure what they call it.
I think he had actually attempted to form a party.
In 1929 he formed a party in Jamaica.
But think of what we're talking. We're talking about a gentleman who influenced the entire world, and now is back in Jamaica running for exactly. You see what I mean? So I think you're right in terms of what he became. The hero and things like that came afterwards. Unfortunately,
I mean, we need hindsight to be able to see the value of people. Unfortunately, but take Du Bois. Du Bois was a staunch opposer of Garvey. Yet, at the end of his life, he's the one who ended up in Africa, where Garvey never got a chance to go. And Du Bois ended up realizing that, in fact, Garvey was right. That trying to fit in was not the way. So,
I just want to say something that doesn't really fit into this. When you mention about the Rastas, Garvey was at loggerheads with a lot of the Garveyites. A lot of the Garveyites criticized him strongly because he was critical of Haile Selassie. He felt that Haile Selassie did not build up the country militarily and socially, and that he deserted the country at a particular time, even though his wife was participating. But he strongly supported throughout the getting rid of the Italians from Ethiopia. But in terms of Haile Selassie, he always had those problems with Haile. But most of the members of the Garveyite movement did not go along with him. They continue to support
well,
Haile
the
Selassie.
movement. By the time Selassie came along and Garvey could speak about it, the movement was not much to speak about at that point, anyhow.
No, but even when Garvey left the United States and came back to Jamaica, the movement continued. You had Pan-African conferences after and so on. I mean, it was not as strong because his presence.
Like it was not nowhere close to it.
But in Jamaica, there were a lot of Garveyites there who came out and strongly supported him.
And, you know, again, for the benefit of our young people, it is important to make the point also, because some Eurocentric writers and others would give the impression that Garvey was just a rabid racist. But I want persons to understand, Garvey's program was not about racism per se. What Garvey was trying to do is to elevate the people. Right?
It was nationalistic.
Exactly.
And Curtis, that's
black nationalism.
That's an important point, because when Garvey came to St. Vincent, he delivered 2 lectures. The administrator, the top people, and they were so impressed with him because there was this image of him, and they were, because he was speaking about moral upliftment, you know.
Does not mean anti-white. And I think people tend to
interpret it that way.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So I think we have to emphasize that. I think Garvey was about self.
Wanted to have knowledge of self and control their own affairs. Does not mean we have to interfere with Chinese or Portuguese or Pakistanis. It means we control our things. Now it's important also to understand that when white power structures say we have to control ourselves, it does imply taking control of the natural resources of others, right? And that's not, and they're not doing it because they don't like others. It's because they need that to survive. 10% of the population is European or European descent. They're consuming 85% of the resources. So a just and fair and world, if it was to start today, we forget all about the past. You know, we're not trying to get back. We just start today fair. From today onward, that would mean that the Europeans, including America, would have to consume 10% of the resources of the world. They would have to go from 85 to 10. You do realize that they will never agree to this. They won't tell you, but they will never. And they do the maths. We know these maths because they calculated it. We don't calculate.
Just before we take the next break, let me read from one of our regular followers. Bongo Shaka, good night, sir. Greetings to one and all, blessings and love. Marcus Garvey stood up for the oppressed of the world, especially the preaching of black consciousness, self-reliance, and also religion. Garvey said that black men should own their own business. He said that one should look to Ethiopia and that it shall rise again, and we must support Emperor Haile Selassie. He responded. This was said in 1930. He fought against white supremacy at that time, so it became very dangerous for him. So a plot was made by the CIA to bring him down. One utterance of Garvey is that the greatest traitor of the black man is those that are highly placed in education and society. He said many of them have little faith and generally susceptible to bribery for selling out. If the rights of their own people, I have seen that many leaders in the Caribbean haven't studied or grasped the teaching of Garvey. Garvey book should be included in our teaching of black history. I challenge what Dr. Fraser said about Garvey and Haile Selassie. I have just mentioned to you of 1930 utterances on the same Rastafari.
It's 1930.
That's 1935.
Yeah,
It's
but
documented.
yes.
Because what Doctor is saying is that yes, in it doesn't contradict. In 1930, when he got crowned, of course, Garvey and anybody would have been so happy to see it. And then you have to analyze what you've seen.
You talked about after the invasion.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And
The
there's
second invasion.
The second invasion.
Second invasion,
Yes, exactly.
So we'll take the break now and we'll be back.
This is Jake's Kitchen, the most trendy place to customize your kitchen in all of SVG. And when we say trendy, you better believe it's hot. Cause we've got the latest in stylish kitchen accessories and fittings at astonishingly available prices. Guaranteed to make your kitchen bling bling. And our new arrivals will do just that. Step up to our showroom, upstairs Caribbean Glass in Kingstown, and make your kitchen the envy of all. When you're customized by Jake's Kitchen, you don't keep up with the neighbors. Oh no, the neighbors better keep up with you.
Unlike cheap laundry detergents, the new Ozone powder detergent protects your clothes, keeps colors bright, and removes stains. Wash after wash. Ozone, all day, every day. Clean clothes with long-lasting freshness. The new Ozone powder detergent. A new look and 3 new fragrances at an affordable price. The power of Ozone.
Ozone products distributed by General and Maritime Agencies Limited.
Reacquaint yourself with St. Vincent's most exquisite bar and restaurant, housed in a building which dates back to 1814. This treasured restaurant is known for their world-famous burgers and club sandwiches, 3-course buffet meals during weekdays, special corporate dinner, after-work lime, or just to relax, unwind, and be you in the wonderful ambience of our rambling mahogany bar. Other services include full-service catering and event planning for birthdays, weddings, parties, or any special occasions.
Welcome to Downtown Pharmacy, located close to the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital and opposite the Rubis gas station. We cater for all your pharmaceutical needs and medical supplies, which include injections and vaccines. Our opening hours are 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Thursday, until 6 p.m. on Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. on Saturday, 4 to 9 p.m. on Sunday. Call us today at 452-5552 or text or WhatsApp your prescription to 491-3801 and we will have it ready for pickup at your convenience. Downtown Pharmacy, we are here to serve you.
Welcome back to the final segment of our Viewpoint program for tonight. And in this segment, we are going to be focusing on the future. Is there still work to be done to fulfill the mission of Marcus Garvey throughout the diaspora? Perhaps we could even extend it to Africa too, but we are focusing on the diaspora as people who are living in the diaspora. So after all that Garvey would have campaigned for, his education, his self-reliance, the whole idea of developing a purpose. But we have a caller, so let us take the caller. Good night, welcome to Viewpoint. Caller gone again. Is the caller back? Good night. Welcome to the Viewpoint. Good night. Okay, yes.
Definitely, like we were saying, it could be argued that there's more work to be done now than at the time of Garvey. But most definitely, as long as there is not a, we'll never get everybody. Nobody ever, nothing was ever done when everybody agreed. Nowhere in the world. But at least a critical mass. when we'll get to a point where we have a critical mass of our people that have a basic but yet strong knowledge of self and image of self and view of self and sees the world through our lenses as opposed to other people's lenses, then yes, Garvey's mission still.
Okay, let us take this caller. Good night, caller. Welcome to Deep Viewpoint. Good night, caller. There's something going wrong there. Yes. But, okay, yes, continue.
Yes, well, there's, of course, the mission was to get us to a point where we have control of ourselves and our destiny, right? So as long as we're not there, we have work to do, of course.
But one could argue that, well, these countries are independent countries. They are making the decisions. Similarly, although we're not focusing in Africa, you have quite a number of independent countries now making the decisions.
Well, if you look at what's happened to Africa in terms of independence, I think many of them have failed. I think what has happened is the scars of the European colonizers in Africa and the Caribbean still remain because we continue to do things the way that we were taught to do it. So even if we're in charge of the country or we're in charge of the curriculum, we have not deviated from what was brought to us. And in several regards, which I'm not going to go too deep into, but if we look at what has happened, for example, in the Congo, after Leopold left, the scars that has, the black people continue to do what the white imperialists and the white fascists did. They started to do that to their own people. And I think we've seen that in the Caribbean also. So it's not a matter of being free on paper or being independent. I think it's the mind and what has happened in terms of the economic control. Certain people has gotten certain wealth in the black community, and they've used that against their own. And I think that's important. That's very, very important in this discussion, because I think Garvey, if he was here today, would be appalled.
Well, the thing is that we have to take into account that it's a totally different context now.
Yes.
When you look at the economy, who drives the string, the IMF.
1 minute now. Good night, caller. Welcome to Deep Viewpoint. Good night.
Good night, Curtis. You seem to be the chief of everybody there in your pretty outfit. Let me congratulate you for symbolizing Africanism or what?
Well,
anyhow, that's beside the point. As I listen to you guys, very distinguished panel tonight, and here am I trying to see what I can make out of all of this, going back to over 100 years, it would be, since Garvey made his presence felt. And the struggle continues. I love what the gentleman from seeing in the black top American or whatever, I love what he said just now. What I would like somebody to tell me, could we ever hold the reins of economic power in the world as black people? Could we ever hold the reins of economic power as black people in the world? Since economics is such an important part of our development, keeping us alive, afloat, because when all is said and done, we are still subjected to a lot of European, our masters and so on, the colonialism, the impact it has had on us. We are still, like I have coined the statement that the legacy of slavery and colonialism has left us with permanent brain damage. That's how I see it. Everybody wouldn't, I wouldn't get everybody to agree with that statement. But when you look at how we are fighting or trying to find our own niche, or find, looking for our we had Black Power, for instance, which opened up a lot of us open up our eyes to see the world as a different place. And with the work of Marcus Garvey, would you say that if he meant so much in terms of black consciousness, black development, would you say that our leaders in the Caribbean and wherever as black people have failed to continue with that, with all what Marcus Garvey had to say? Because Caribbean politicians and wherever black people are fighting for a better way of life, I think if Marcus Garvey's words and all what he said was so powerful, we should have continued along that way, that focus and so on. I may be wrong, but I'm just showing that out. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, responses. Yeah.
Well, the gentleman seemed not doubt, but put in question the actual impact of Garvey. If Garvey wasn't so important, people that are important and powerful and rich wouldn't have gone through the trouble of setting up a whole different system. I mean, we're talking the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're talking a lot of money, a lot of resources allocated to ensure that Garvey's ideas, not Garvey himself, because they didn't shoot him, but Garvey's ideas was what needed to be discredited. And so it has to have some sort of serious value. Anything that came remotely close to what Garvey's goal was, a lot of resources were put behind to ensure it didn't work. Yeah. And so that proves to us that it is indeed valuable.
I think Garvey's impact came all the way through the 60s into the 70s. And if you want to talk about the Black Power and talk about the Black Panther, and you talk about Rastafarianism and the impact that they had in that era, but the system that you talk about went into high gear to disrupt all of that. And that the changes that we saw from the 80s up to now in Africa and the Caribbean, I think was a deliberate machination, if you want to put it that way, to destroy all that power that was coming from the 60s and the 70s and the breaking of the mental slavery. Because what happened after that? Everything changed in terms of our nutrition, in terms of our spirituality. Everything changed, and now we have exactly what we call ourselves. That was created by that. There was an agenda to that. So now how we view ourselves is really a full black culture. I call it full black. It's not this what of the 60s and the 70s where the mentality from Garvey was being shaped.
Finally.
Yeah.
Because
it's a turnaround.
In the time of Garvey, it was a group. It was the UNIA members. By the time of the 60s, you could be on the outskirt of Black Revolution, and you still had this Black pride by the time you were in the 60s and 70s. And if you heard something happen, in Africa, you felt somewhat connected by it.
But it comes back to a purpose.
Now,
but
if you're African American,
they're jumping to a different beat now.
Yeah.
A lot of the people,
but we're not
they're coming out of the Black Power movement. They have now gotten into the mainstream, and their agenda is completely different.
But that was deliberate.
That's what they're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
They were targeted.
That's what I'm saying. So they've gone into the mainstream, and the whole complex situation.
But it's important to understand that it was by design, and it's not because a lot of our people are saying like black people can't do nothing together. We can't do this, as if we decided not to. Right. As if it was inherent in our DNA to try something and fail it. Yeah. And look at the Jews, they can do it. The Chinese, they can do it. There's nobody getting themselves together to prevent other people to do it.
Back then, the 60s, 70s, and it comes back to what Garvey said about having a purpose, an aim. There was a clear fight for political independence and for control, if you like, of your countries. And some people even embark on that role saying, let us control our own economic resources too. Okay? Now what is the aim? What is the purpose? What is the fight about? Now, you take something as reparation. Okay? We are saying, now look, despite all that would have been done by governments in the Caribbean in the post-independence period. Slavery, genocide, colonialism have left such a legacy that today we still have deficits that we can't overcome without the people who are responsible doing some repair. But you don't have the mass of the people singing that song. In fact, they look at those who come up with reparations as idle and somehow not serious. So I'm saying that, remember, this is a new period. It's different from the 60s and 70s. So what is it?
No, there's so many things to come into the play.
Yeah.
We spoke about education.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look at education today, my criticism of education is that is a certificate education. Everybody's trying now to get a job to do.
Yeah.
In terms of understanding Garvey and so on, they don't find a place on the syllabus. You know, because people looking for jobs, so that you go into subjects which, you know, but in terms of understanding ourselves and so on, that does not exist at all.
But it goes back to what I'm saying. I think it's by design, right? We talk about universal education, and everyone gets an education, right? But not everyone is caught out to be a college grad. Not everyone is caught, not everyone is caught out to be a lawyer, doctor. Back then, you identified with a trade. Right, we've lost so much of that, and that is by design. And I think a lot has changed since then, the 60s and 70s. But what we talk about, for example, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about it proudly. When we hear about the Black Panther, it's considered a terrorist group by certain people. Mm-hmm. No one talks about the health centers that they built and the schools, the breakfast program. You know what I mean? Because the idea is to generate 30 years of negative, and that's it's by design.
Yeah, but again, and we usually make the mistake, I like how you put it, that somehow education is in these separate compartments with subjects and so on. But I'm saying all the subjects, the history, the science, whatever, they can be integrated to bring about the positive thing that you want. And it shouldn't be like some people say, you should do more science and less humanities. But it shouldn't be that way. It should be a clear integration where both streams working together to produce what you want. Yeah. And there's a problem you hear people say about education all the time, as if some subjects should not be taught at all because they're not important.
But where is Garvey asked himself a question that sparked his vision and his mission, which was, where is the black man's government? Where is the black man's king? And that question, you talk about all this would have to come out as a vision. It has to be a vision that is now then put into motion. Who has a vision right now? Whose vision is black people right now enacting? Is it ours? Can we name 10 black people that sat together and designed a vision, common vision for the path of black people? I mean, white people have people sitting down to chart a course for white people. Now, Joe Smith don't have a clue about that, right? But it's happening still. Mm-hmm. In China, there's a group of people that sit down and chart a course for Chinese in China and abroad. We have Chinese in St. Vincent right now. They're on that course right now. What they're doing here has to do with that.
Yeah.
What is the agenda that has been designed, developed by black people for white people? It does not exist. We are on an agenda and on a course that has been set, designed by Europeans.
Okay, let us take the caller. Good night, caller. Welcome to the Viewpoint. Good night, caller. Good night.
Yes, Curtis, I just called back. Was there any connection with the Farrakhan Million Man March some years ago in New York, Washington, or wherever? Was this
connection with?
Has this had the impact in terms of what they wanted or what he wanted to achieve in terms of sustaining something like that? Thank you.
in 95, the objective of the mission was definitely attained. The objective of the mission was to show the world that black people in America were not what black people in America were portrayed to be outside. You have to remember 1995, we're coming out of the riots in LA. We're coming out of a series of movies that just came out and that are everywhere around the world. They all came out one after the other. Colors, Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, Juice. A bunch of movies back to back to back to back came out portraying finally black people on the screen. Finally. And what was it? Boom, boom, bam, bam, guns, guns, guns. Now, what you had is a setup in 1992, 93, 94 for mass genocide, because it would have been accepted by anybody outside of America that the Army, the National Guard went into the major city of America and shoot black people like they're doing now. Shoot them down like dogs. It would have been accepted, it would have been understood because of what was seen on TV. So the 1995 Million Man March was to show that black people, black men in particular, could get together and were not what is seen on TV by getting a million people anywhere. That ain't done nowhere. You get them together peacefully. We left the march. I mean, you can't leave Heritage Square today with 75 people and you have to send 50 people to pick up the trash. We had 1 million black men in DC that day, and they didn't even have to send a cleaning crew the next day. We cleaned the place. So that was the objective. The march that happened afterwards, which was the Million Moors movement, which was to set up an agenda, that has been, it's still in the works, but it did not bring the fruit yet.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to give each of you like 2 minutes to wrap up. And of course, don't forget to mention your lecture tomorrow. Yes, so we're starting. Doc?
Yeah, the big issue now, you mentioned the vision and the mission. Where's that vision or that mission? Who sets the agenda? And if you tie this in with independence, on independence, you are supposed to be going a path. We could take control of ourselves. But that has not been happening. And I keep saying that anytime we have an anniversary, we have the 40th anniversary of independence, one of the things we need to do is to reflect on that road that we started at independence, which is another phase of reflect and see where we are going. But we don't do that.
Never.
In fact, we celebrate about how many things, how good things are. So there is no reflection, and if there's no reflection, then there's no mission. You know, and that is the problem which we face.
Indeed.
Yeah. So we have a chance to correct that this year, which really hard. So let us hope we push it towards reflecting.
Exactly.
It's always good. It's always good to reflect. I think it's important because you talk about independence, and I don't think the Caribbean, anyone is really independent, because I think we've grown our debt. We've grown our economic dependence on other nations. Maybe not England, maybe not France, but other nations. So what have we achieved in terms of the influence? I do call it, neocolonialism. Yeah. Right? And it's happening all over the Caribbean, and we cannot bow our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Who are we indebted to? We have not created the atmosphere in our islands for the people of the island. I think it's a very segmented few that's enjoying the wealth in most of the islands of the Caribbean, unfortunately. And I think these are the kind of things that we need to focus on.
Yes.
Garvey's concept was that every black person should see themselves as a unit that is part of a whole. And to understand that concept, once you know yourself, then you will naturally figure out your self-interest. And we're still there. We're still into the understanding that we are a black people worldwide. We might have different countries. That don't prevent you from anything. But you have to understand who is self and what is your self interest. And this is still at the core of what is our issue and any mission or vision that we need to develop. Everything will come out of it. Everything will figure out after naturally what is our self-interest.
Okay, and perhaps a fitting quote to that coming from Garvey, and I quote, "If you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life." Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being on this program. We hope that it was very informative and educational, and that you, the listeners and viewers, would have something to take away from the program. Don't forget, tomorrow the celebration continues for Marcus Garvey. Obviously, if he was alive, his birthday would have been celebrated on Saturday, the 17th of August. But our Rastafarian brothers and sisters, they're having an activity tomorrow. Monday, I think, is at French's house. So you're invited to attend.
7 o'clock.
Good. Once again, thank you very much for being part of the Viewpoint. And 2 Sundays from now, we'll bring you another interesting program. Thank you very much and good night.
Running, bro. The door open. Boom. I'm like, now I'm hyperventilating. I feel Officer Darren Wilson walking past me. My hairs started standing up on the back of my neck. That's when I really became afraid. He's walking like this with his firearm drawn out. I'm standing right here. He did not look at me. He didn't look at me not one time. I'm looking at him like out the corners of my eye because I don't want to move and frighten him. I don't want to move and like let him think that I was trying to scare him. He shot the second shot. Boom! I said, I jumped because I saw Mike. Like, you know, like, oh, that's what made me believe that bullet touched him. It didn't hit him in the back.
You saw Darren shoot while Mike was running away.
I saw it with my 2 eyes. Darren Wilson shot his gun a second time